So this guy comes in with a 2014 Bentley Flying Spur. He's got a blown tweeter in the dash and he wants to replace that. And whereas we get to talking, he tells me that it's actually very difficult to get those tweeters out. I hadn't done one of these before, so it was helpful that he gave me a link to another shop that had done a video on taking those tweeters out. They were somewhat comprehensive about it. They, showed a few things, enough to get me started. As we got to talking about the system and what he wanted in there, it became apparent that he wanted a little bit more performance and fidelity throughout the entire system. So what we did was we set him up with an AFM 5.9-bit from Audison, a Voce two-way set of components, and a hybrid audio Legadia L12 SW. We decided to do that in an infinite baffle setup in the back. He wanted a little bit of trim work done on it. The goal was to keep it simple and classy and to give him some good performance and some bump down the road. I knew that I wanted to trim it out in black vinyl to match the leather in the vehicle, do some black acrylic to match the other trim pieces in the vehicle, and then also just a little bit of chrome in there to kind of, highlight everything. Figured that this combination of elements would really bring the trunk into the interior of the vehicle. Turns out that really, I think the right way to do it is to remove the windshield and then do all the same things that we did to get this out. I think that's a little bit beyond what we were interested in doing on this, so I kind of just made it work. Now the door panels were an entirely different scenario. They were easy to remove, speakers are right there, real basic speaker plates need to be made 6x9 to 6.5 in this case. It was really no problem at all. Just like any other SQ build we're gonna do, we did some sound shield in the doors to keep the mid bass going. So the first thing I did was try getting into the trunk to, look at the factory amplifier. I looked at the battery on the driver's side. Looked like there was possibly an amplifier behind that. Started pulling the battery, which was harder than it looked like it would be. Got to the electronics back there and it was really obvious all of a sudden that was not where the factory amp was. A little bit more research and I realized that there's another battery on the passenger side and the amplifier is behind that one. Luckily it wasn't a waste of time because I saw that there was a spot on the driver's side where I could build an amp rack and slot the amplifier in there, run some wire over to the passenger side and tap into the amplifier. Once I actually got to the amplifier, then I started testing some speaker outputs to see which things popped and which things didn't. It was very strange because I was coming across pairs of speakers. I could get all the rear speakers without a problem, but only like the front left tweeter and the right front mid bass. Front left mid bass and the right front right tweeter were still a mystery at this point. kept spinning my wheels on it. I was getting kind of frustrated with it. I reached out to my friend at Audison, Chris McNulty, and he gave me some updated information. And as I started looking at this compared to what I was looking at in the car, I realized that I was only looking at what I assumed was the output plug on this amplifier, and there's some overflow. There's some output wires on the input plug. So once I got that figured out, there was no problem after that. Thanks, Chris. Being in the spot that I picked out for the amplifier, I had planned on just taking a piece of aluminum and bending it up into the shape that I needed. First, I made a pattern out of a piece of cardboard so I knew what shape everything needed to be and where the tabs needed to go. Then I copied that onto a piece of aluminum, cut that out. I tried bending this piece of aluminum on the brake that we had in the shop, and it was not strong enough, so pulled out a hammer and hammered it out. So now that I know where the amplifier is going to go, I start pre-wiring the amplifier, getting all the wire lengths ready to just drop into the vehicle and plug it in everywhere. Pre-wired the beacon. It's a high resolution Bluetooth connection that goes directly into the amplifier to where it'll switch over as soon as we link into that. Then I painted the amp rack black, mounted the amplifier on it, and mounted the amp into the car. This is the point where I did the initial setup, just set up the inputs and outputs of the processor and got everything calibrated up, look at what the inputs were, see what equalization needed to be done to correct that, and moved on. Now getting into the fun part. So starting an infinite baffle wall, I get in there and I just measure the general opening that I have. Cut a square just to start adding strips of wood in order to get the shape of the actual opening because it's kind of curved on some sides. This is just to make sure that we get a real accurate side to side, top to bottom fit all the way across. So I stripped the trunk so I can add sound damping and the mounts to mount the baffle wall. I put L brackets on the strut towers on the sides so that I can mount the baffle to that, and also found locations in the floor where I can mount there as well. Once everything's sound deadened and the mounts are created, then I put everything back in and just cut the little slots into the side so then those mounts will stick through. With the plug made, I'm able to measure out and design out the actual metal substructure that's going into the baffle to get the maximum side to side that I can with it. So then I get busy cutting 1-inch tubing to make the initial frame. Building a wall can seem like a real simple thing, but the idea is to make sure you've got a really strong baffle that's not going to bend or resonate too much. You want it to pass any of this energy that the sub creates to the vehicle body so then you get more of that low frequency going in there. Weld the structure together. Then I fit it in so I can line up where the screw holes will go. So I go back to the plug that I made and make the sub opening. I set the inner baffle into the frame, fill in with body filler all the way around the edges to make sure it's really solid. So I mount the substructure in there, so then I can put the cosmetic piece on top and start designing that. I create 4 mounting points to where the outer part of the baffle and the inner part of the baffle combine. Now, I haven't done a lot of aluminum work, so I wanted to make sure the trim piece was going to work before I started doing the entire panel this way. So I actually went through and started to make the trim piece first. I decided on a shape that was a little similar to the front grille. Later on, it ended up looking a lot like the front grille, but that's okay. So this trim piece I was making, I took a 1/4 inch piece of black acrylic and glued it to a piece of aluminum. Routed it all out, shaped it, sanded it, then I went to buff and polish it. So I'm sitting there and I'm buffing on this thing, on this wheel, and it's going along fine, no big deal. And I start getting to a point and suddenly there's this pop. Everything it just disappears. The whole piece disappeared. I felt something hit my thumb and something hit me in the face. And there was just no piece anymore. And I look around and this thing is twisted around the bench grinder. And I'm just shocked. I don't understand what just happened. I realized I might have a piece of something in me somewhere. So I went into the bathroom to look in the mirror and to see if there was anything, sticking out of my face or whatever, because, you don't feel these things immediately all the time. As I get back into the shop, I see Caleb and Cameron looking around the shop looking for something. They look at me and they said, "Did you hear a loud bang?" And I said, "I don't know, but I think it might have been me." I had headphones all the time, so I didn't hear the sound. Apparently what they had heard, this thing explode in my hands and the pieces of acrylic flew all over the place. So they were trying to figure out what happened. Luckily there was no dead Dan to, pick up off the floor. So even with the mishap, I knew that I could build this piece, so I went ahead and started doing the cosmetic trim panel the way that I planned. I used the same template that I made to make the trim piece to mold into the panel. So taped it all off, put a little bit of double-sided tape around it to space for the vinyl, and then started filling with some body filler. I just designed some basic insert pieces to go on the sides to cover the screws that would mount the two pieces together. I had to rebuild this trim piece, and I decided I want to make it a little bit thicker. So instead of using one layer of 1/4 inch acrylic, I used 2 layers of acrylic. Used some acrylic glue to stick those 2 things together, and then contact cement to stick the aluminum. Went through the same process of routering it out, shaping it, and then started buffing again. This time I was very careful with buffing. So then the last thing was just to build the press grill plate for it. You have to build a 2-piece press, the negative on one side and then positive on the other, so then you put the material in between and then press it down. I also worked in a ridge in the middle. It's just a 1/4 inch press. The rest of it was a 1/2 inch press. So I run a piece of welding rod in between to match up with the kind of design. To put the rod in, basically I just drilled, matching holes on either side of the grill and just slid it all the way through, put some glue on one side, and then there it is. After the grill was pressed, I decided to leave it silver. Initially I was going to paint it black so it wasn't so much like a copy of the front grill, but I don't know, it just looked really good. So I kept it silver, epoxied the grill into the frame and mounted it up. I was pretty happy with the way it looked. spite of all the challenges I had in this build, it really wasn't that bad. I really, I think everything turned out well. I like the way it sounded, the way everything looked, and the client was really happy with it. So it's always a win. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, let me know, and take the long way home. Next time I think I'll build the A-pillars.